Very good morning. Welcome.
Smart Means Business. I'm Andrew Barigi. Today is the 10th of October, and I officially welcome you from the independence celebrations that were held yesterday, and quite a number of delegates where there are different presidents from the different Africans in the East African community were right there. But the question is Uganda's economy growing ever since 1962, or we are still in a stunted state? That's upon you to answer that. And I officially welcome you to this particular segment of the news Recarp as we go through the previous news stories that were making headlines into the world of business. That was on Friday. And we start with cleaner energy transition, as research conducted shows that for us to achieve that by 2030, this would require an investment of about 25 billion US dollars. Let's have the details of this report. I'll be returning with more highlights.
State Minister of Energy says integration of energy resources and balancing to utilize will ensure that green energy stays in place without wiping out other energy resources.
In the case of Uganda, having those vast sources of green energy, we should not actually negate the potential of integrating the fossil fuels into the green sources of energy, because that blend enables us to get the money that we require to develop other sources of energy. So this is where we are at a mix. While we are talking and discussing in various fora, transition from dirty energy to clean energy, Uganda, we're actually saying we have got to see a mix, because we have all these sources. We should actually be discussing more on integration, which would be healthy for the environment, healthy for the development of the economy, healthy for sustainable achievement of the development goals, that equilibrium, that common position where we develop clean energy, but also using dirty energy that we have to balance the development of the country.
Which we will have, was financed actually by the African Development Bank. Unfortunately, Uganda is not in that project, but we are trying to include Uganda and other countries in another initiative for renewable energy, which will be financed by the World Bank. But I can give you roughly, and I will be very humble in this, is like 2 million can at least help us in the short term. At least to put in place this is strategic planning.
Some of the priorities of clean energy transitions and investments in the region include renewable energy and universal access to clean and cooking solutions.
I'd like to emphasize is the financial gap, because to fulfill this vision of the greater Horn of Africa having a bigger economy, not increasing so much the energy demand, but changing the mix to a more modern, to a cleaner mix of fuels, you need investment. And you need a blending of public and private. You need to attract climate finance and a number which is not only for the region, but for the continent, Africa as a whole, to provide universal access to electricity and clean cooking to all Africans in the continent by the end of the decade. We need 25 billion USD per year.
Energy efficiency is a key lever to reduce strains on the growing energy system, relieving energy pressures on consumer bills, managing fuel import burdens, limiting the scale expensive infrastructure, and lessening the risk of dumping inefficient appliances and vehicles.
Today, about 140 million people in the greater Horn of Africa lack access to electricity, and of course less than 15% use cleaner energy. And a study by International Energy Agency reveals that achieving full access to modern energy across that's the continent by 2030 would require about 25 million US dollars for that to be fulfilled. And away from that, let's head to the national budget as the government releases the budget for the financial year 2022-2023. Let's have the details.
The government of Uganda budgetless debt, external financing and local revenue amounts to Ugandan shillings 26 trillion and Ugandan shillings 13.13 trillion has been provided for the first half of the financial year. This came in as the Ministry of Finance released the budget of the first half of this financial year and highlights of the second quarter of the approved budget 2022-2023.
The countries are aware, and we have stated severally, the approved budget for this year was 48.13 trillion shillings, as summarized in the table. We have wage approved at 6.375 trillion shillings, and at half year we have released 3.605 trillion, a performance of 56.6%. And I will explain later why there is a slight more release than what we had anticipated or what was approved. The non-wage, the total budget approved is 11.1 trillion shillings, and we have so far released for half year, or by the end of this half year, we would have released 5.8 trillion, which is 52.3% of that budget. On the Government of Uganda development budget, the total approved is 7.85 trillion shillings, and by half year, I would have released 3 trillion, slightly above 3 trillion, which is 38.5%. On arrears, domestic arrears, the approved budget 661.95 billion shillings. By half year, we would have released 701 billion, which is a performance of 105.9%. We have been very generous on paying arrears. So the total Government of Uganda budget approved was 26.001 trillion shillings, and by half year would have released 13.135 trillion, which is 50.5%. On the debt, the total debt approved was 15.17 trillion shillings. By half year would have performed at 7.88 trillion, which is 51.9%. So we are very compliant with our debt repayment. External financing, the approved is 6.716 trillion. By half year we would have performed at 3.947 trillion, which is 58.8%. Local revenue, the total approved is 239 billion, and we are going to report on its performance by half year because the numbers keep coming in.
There happened a complaint from the local government about their money.
The outcry from local governments about Ministry of Finance keeping their local revenue. It continues to come, and as we were in the local government budget consultation meeting, it also came in, and they are saying very, very, very strongly that when you collect their money, you don't give it to them back. Someone has brought in 100 million and you end up giving them only 80 million. My understanding was that after even at the first release, you actually even gave them an advance. But it would be good to understand the process, like we have really clearly articulated on how we release the funding here, on when the local government When do they receive less money than they have given you?
The Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Finance addressed the nation about the economic performance and the second quarter release of the financial year 2022 to 2023.
Financial year 21-22 revised estimates from Uganda Bureau of Statistics show that the economy grew by 4.7%, exceeding the initial expectation of 3.8, as this economy continues to recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the emerging shocks which have impacted us. Notwithstanding all of that, the economy of Uganda has continued to be very resilient, growing at 4.7% as opposed to the projected 3.8% for the last financial year. Now, performance so far this financial year, which started in July, indicates that the economy has continued on its recovery path, as shown by high-frequency indicators of economic activity.
Ramadan Gobi continued to inform on how the government is curbing inflation. There was a positive outlook in growth in Uganda, supported by the government, public and private investments, especially in the oil and gas sector. However, inflation increased from 9% in August to 10% in September 2022.
It was mainly driven by the depreciation of the shilling due to strengthening of the US dollar, which has affected the prices of imports. And this has led to what we call imported inflation. In other words, the Uganda shilling depreciated against the US dollar to 3,832.4 per US dollar in August, from Uganda shillings 3,791.6 per US dollar recorded the previous month.
In addition, the release caters for 33% of the local government and development grants to enable them implement projects timely, and the balance will be released in the subsequent quarters.
Government's policy response in curbing the inflation, therefore, requires us to coordinate both the monetary and fiscal policy. On the monetary side, Bank of Uganda has increased the central bank rate to 9% in August and further to 10% in October. And the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development has implemented supportive fiscal policy in the first quarter of this financial year, which has helped to slow down the inflation without compromising continued economic recovery.
Our government released the budget for the financial year, that's 2020-2023, of course, totaling to 48.1 trillion. The quarter two expenditure releases have been set, taking into account the improved performance in the revenue and need to support that economic recovery. And away from that, let's head to the Bank of Uganda. And we are looking at the monetary policy, which has been increased by 1%, raising it from 9% to 10%. Let's have the details of this report.
From 9% in August to 10% in September 2022, the annual headline inflation rate increased. From 7.2% in August to 8.1% in September, annual core inflation rate, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, has increased. The annual inflation rates for energy, gasoline, and utilities, which had been rising since the start of the year, decreased to 18.7% in September from 19.6% in August, providing some relief from the pressure on prices. To limit inflation, however, we must raise the CBR. We also consider the medium-term projection level for the CBR.
Attainable because CBR is the benchmark. that all other rates follow. Bank of Uganda impacts on the CBR because it wants other rates in the economy to follow the CBR. And when they increase the rate of the CBR, intuitively all other rates will go up, and that will discourage demand for money and will discourage inflation.
Is it reasonable for the central bank to come out and sustainably boost the CBR, given that the COVID-19 pandemic has had a terrible effect on Ugandan economy and the chances for growth are being threatened by this?
Economy cannot easily grow with higher inflation. If you doubt this, you can ask what is happening in Zimbabwe. You cannot even make plans. So what we are saying today is that allow us first deal with this faster evil of inflation. Then when prices are stable, we shall now come up with mechanisms, including reducing CBR. When everything is now okay, we can reduce CBR. Why? To support growth. Now we are increasing CBR to what? To control inflation. When inflation goes, we shall start reducing CBR. Why? To enable people get access credit and do what? And do their businesses. Why? To increase economic growth.
In the coming months, headline inflation is forecast to rise and average around 7.3% in 2022 and between 8 to 10% in 2023 before declining back to around 5% in 2024. In this case, Ugandans have been advised to stay calm and patient.
As Central Bank, we have diagnosed, we have the three factors that we feel have been the causes. The external factors, the war in Ukraine, the global supply chain disruptions because of COVID, then we have been having drought. We have hope that sooner or later we shall have things improve. Why? It's raining, so we know we are going to be assured of food. Once food is there, we can deal with now other things. I'm also hearing, even as Central Bank, we are hearing that Ukraine and Russia, they are a little bit talking. Yes, Russia has carved off some parts, but they are coming to tables. So if the global tensions also, geopolitical tensions also come down, then it improves more on the supply chain globally, but also the flow of goods globally also becomes easier because there are no wars, there are no this, and then that means the oil prices, if you've been seeing the oil pumps, they are coming a little bit down, although the OPEC.
The outlook for inflation is very vague because there are several concerns to be aware of. The risk of equation is tilted towards higher risk. The entrenchment of higher inflation expectations, the escalations of geopolitical tensions and the resulting disruption of supply chains, a tighter monetary policy by major central banks, further depreciation of the currency, and the effect of unfavorable weather on food production are some of the upside risks.
And now let's wind this up with the African, that's Continental Free Trade Area, as in an effort to further that's economic integration of the African continent and create a single market for products and, of course, services for almost 1.3 billion people throughout Africa. The African Continental Free Trade Area is an ambitious bilateral agreement. SMART24 TV, in a meeting with the head of the Continental, that's African Free Trade Area, they underlined the need to care because there are complications with the project that's in the area to be resolved. Let's have the details.
The objective of the African Trade Area is to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of business persons and investments, and thus pave the way for accelerating the establishment of the Continental Customs Union and the African Customs Union.
And exporters of manufactured goods on the continent. I'm just making an example of the opportunity that the AFCFTA does offer. We are in partnership with Afreximbank. We usually engage on trade missions with Afreximbank so that the trade finance questions that arise, they are immediately available to answer the trade finance questions, and in most cases actually to start business origination and deal transactions and supporting transactions. So on our next visit we will bring Afreximbank with us because we think it's important that as we open the markets We also open the markets to trade finance.
The trade area is to combine the gross domestic product of around US $3.4 trillion to be achieved by making significant policy reforms and trade facilitation measures across African signatory nations. However, there is a challenge of transport and connectivity across the region.
That as we open the markets, we also open the markets to trade finance. Transport and logistics is a very big problem, particularly air transport and air connectivity in Africa. I went to the AU summit in Malabo in May. I traveled from Accra to Lomé, from Lomé to Cotonou, from Cotonou to Lagos, from Lagos to Malabo. That distance, if there was a direct flight, it would have taken about an hour. But it took me the whole day because of this challenge of connectivity and air traffic connectivity, in particular in Africa. We have raised this matter with the CEO of our airlines in Africa. We've also raised it with the ministers of transport.
The AfCFTA aims to reduce tariffs by using a single currency, which manufacturers say will ease trade.
It's very good on paper. The only challenge I envisage is the issue of having a single tariff, which is very, very tricky. First of all, we all use different currencies. Uganda shillings, South Sudan, they have their own currency. Tanzania shillings, Kenya shilling, Rwandan francs, Burundi francs. It might take some time to be actualized, but it's a very good initiative. Free trade area, the barriers revolve around tariffs there. We might agree that we are going to have a single tariff across the board. But when you reach in Congo, where there's roadblocks after roadblocks, kit kidogo after kit kidogo, it becomes a little bit of a huge challenge.
We are ready. At least about 150 companies are ready to export. What did we do to make them ready? With the help of our development partner, UNDP, we have been training them on the requirements. We have been helping them on the quality. We have been training them on what it means to export, the documentation required, the process, how they are going to be paid. So this is what we have been doing, and we have been training them.
And now let's head for a quick break. We'll return shortly. Good morning.
SMART24, driving business.
A World Cup in the desert? The first one in the Middle East. The first to be held at the end of the year? That's crazy. Get ready for spectacular moves. High-flying saves. Unbelievable goals. Out of this world celebration.
Would you believe it? What a moment here!
All 64 matches live. That's over 5,000 action-packed minutes of the FIFA 2022 World Cup Qatar. Now that's crazy. Catch all the action only on SuperSport, your world of champions. On Gold TV. Love it.
Say goodbye to paperwork and travel costs. Now every MTN customer can register to invest in securities anytime and anywhere with Zabu in a few simple steps. Step 1. Dial *292#. Step 2. Select option 1. Register with Zabu. Step 3. Enter your full names. Step 4. Enter your national identification number. Step 5. Enter your national identification card number. In 24 hours, you will receive an SMS confirming your registration. Congratulations, you are now ready to invest.
Is my joy. Ono bulu majiki wange. Ayo Salaba kumabala atukuza nonyirirawo kirako enyange tayisa bubi fabriki kyonna kyekiri kigwa lwa bulu majiki is my choice. Ono bulu majiki ye wange. And the bulu majiki is my choice. Hey, ono bulu majiki ye wange.
Sasulira akasimu k'ekirooto kyo mpola mpola. Funa essimu y'ekirooto kyo leero ng'osasula mpola mpola okutandikira ku nnusu 14 n'ofuna data ow'obwereere okumala omwaka. Essimu zonna kugirako MB za 5 buli lunaku okumala emyezi 12. Osasulira omwaka gumu. Ziri mu maduuka ga MTN n'aga M-Kopa. MTN, everywhere you go.
Okay, we've got to go live now. Everyone tuning in to Super Sport.
Welcome all over the world. It's time for the main event. We've waited a very long time, an age for some. It is delicious, glorious, glorious.
Are you ready for football's greatest season? Live on SuperSport, only on DSTV.
Saving or securing for the future does not only mean investing in stocks, real estates, or companies, but there are so many chances of becoming a billionaire through practicing agriculture. You don't need a very big plot of land or large capital to start, but slowly by slowly you can build an empire. Uganda's economy is made up of agriculture, services, and industry sectors. But agriculture comes out as the backbone of Uganda, employing 70% of the population and contributing half of the country's exports and earnings. Agriculture being the main supplier of raw materials for several companies, and it's readily marketed both in urban and rural areas. There are so many chances of the next billionaires coming from agriculture. From the farmers to the processors, from the processors to the traders, and from the traders to the final consumers. We shall be taking you through the whole agriculture chain. My name is Chris Chitaka Haman, and this is Farm Smart, showing every Friday 7 to 8 p.m. only on SMART24 TV, driving business.
SMART24, driving business.
Welcome back from that, and of course apologies for the little delays right there, but we are back, and good morning once again. And in particular, let's head to the press preview as we go through what's making headlines into the print media. And I have three kinds of newspapers with me. I have the New Vision, the East African, and the Daily Monitor, but let me go straight to the New Vision regarding what's making headlines. And of course, yesterday was Uganda celebrating 60 years of self-rule, and it all rotates around there. And regarding that, on the East African crude and oil pipeline, of course, Museveni invites more partners regarding that. That's in the New Vision, as Yoweri Museveni invites more partners regarding the East African crude oil pipeline. And so it's all about rotating around the independence. And also I see a headline here, Museveni should lead the East African agenda. That's according to the president, the newly elected president of the Republic of Kenya. Regarding that, and Ugandans still in the New Vision urged to uphold the country's social values. Okay, and due to the interest of time, I will end here with the New Vision, and now let me cross straight to the Daily Monitor, and we see what's really making headlines regarding that. And of course, Minister Acheng blocks UVRI from that Ebola testing, and of course that's regarding that particular report into that. And also Uganda, there is a headline here that Uganda is safe. That's government assuring the travelers. That's of course the tourists coming from the different countries, that Uganda is safe despite the Ebola outbreak. And Museveni stings West at Independence Fete. Yes, that's regarding that. And of course, as I still go through the Daily Monitor, I'm just trying to beat up the time because we have to get into the international news right there. And of course, UNEB releases roadmap for UCE, that's Uganda Certificate in Education. Okay, I'm going to stop there with the Daily Monitor and head straight to the East African. And regarding the East African, and we see that it's crunch time for mobile cash agents. Of course, agent networks bear branch of price wars. That's among providers. That's regarding that's East African wide, and also the East African retirement cash transfer plan. That's block drafts rules. That's for workers to move the benefits right there. Okay, and maybe finally, East Africa divided over the growing and import of genetically modified food on safety and health concerns. And that's regarding the press review. And now let's get straight to the international news. And we start with Tanzania's that's gross domestic product as the mining sector hits 7.3%. The contribution of the mining sector to the economy increased to 7.3%. That's last year from 4.8% recorded in 2018, moving closer to the government targets. In her inaugural speech to the parliament last year, President Samia Suluhu Hassan said that the government would strive to increase the mining contribution to at least 10% of the gross domestic product, that's by 2025. Briefing reporters, Mining Commission Executive Secretary, that's Yahya Samamba, said the sector's contribution was on the right track. The government is banking on improving the investment climate and embracing joint ventures with the world's largest miners, among other measures that seek to achieve the goals in the sector. Tanzania is home to a range of minerals, including the best performing gold, which, according to the Bank of Tanzania, is now the country's leading foreign exchange earner. Gold generated a total of 2.7 billion exports in 2021, and of course that's according to the balance of trade indicators. Other minerals include nickel, graphite, tanzanite, sapphire, cobalt, diamond, silver, and ruby. Mr. Samamba said that the exports of minerals increased from 42 tons, that's in 2018, to 55.6 tons last year. According to him, the government is prioritizing mining of graphite, cobalt, and helium, among other minerals, which are considered key in generating clean energy around the world. He said the government was auditing mineral licenses in Tanzania so as to revoke those which are not active. Okay, now that's regarding Tanzania, and we're looking at the mining sector, and this time around we are looking at increasing how the mining sector is increasing Tanzania's GDP, and that's hitting 7.3 as compared to 4.8 recorded in the previous year. Okay, and now away from Tanzania, let's head to Zimbabwe, as mining companies operating in Zimbabwe to pay commodities and cash. The miners operating that's in Zimbabwe will have to pay some of their royalties in refined metal rather than cash. The country's president announced the move in the newspaper on Sunday, October 9th, as the country struggles to benefit from demand for its resources. Main minerals found in Zimbabwe include gold, platinum, chrome, coal, diamonds, and lithium. Starting this October, the government now requires that part of these royalties come as actual refined mining products. That's Mnangagwa wrote regarding that. For a start, Emerson Mnangagwa doesn't want the policy to be frozen in time. The law will target 4 of our key minerals. And that's according to his statement in an article. In the article, the Zimbabwean leader said he had already tasked the Ministries of Finance and Economic Development and that of Mines and Mining Development with fine-tuning the policy in a close consultation with the mining sector and the mining concerns affected. The president also further said that the new policy would require Zimbabwe's Reserve Bank, that's of Zimbabwe, to possess a system-designated minerals even where these are processed beyond the borders of Zimbabwe. Okay, that's it regarding Zimbabwe, as mining companies are required to pay in commodities and of course and cash. So that's very interesting, a remarkable transition right there regarding that. And let's wind up the international news with Kenya, and we are looking at the subsidies as oil producers deal to halt Ruto's subsidy plan. Okay, President William Ruto's plan to fully scrap fuel subsidies will face major windheads after the world's top oil producing countries agreed to deeply cut exports to prevent erosion, that's of revenues. a group of 23 oil exporting countries commonly known as OPEC, that on Wednesday reached a deal to slash production by 2 million barrels per day. A move targeted to pushing prices per barrel back to $100 per barrel for the first time since July. The cartel, which includes 13 member organizations of the petroleum exporting countries, that's like Saudi Arabia and allies like Russia, say the decision was aimed at stabilizing the prices. The decision by OPEC countries has dimmed expectations of lower fuel prices in coming months, a projection that partly informed Kenya's decision to remove subsidy on petrol. That's last month. Global oil prices have been falling in the recent months, largely on the increased supply of exporting countries, but Wednesday's deal to reverse policy on higher output has raised fears the cost might climb. The average landed cost of petrol at the port of Mombasa, for instance, had in August dropped for the first time since January. A ton of petrol arrived at the port that's at $812.9. That's at 24.31% deep from $1,074.1 a month earlier, and the lowest since $776.40 in February, according to data from the Energy Petroleum Regulatory Authority. The expectation was that the declining trend will persist. That's in the near term, making the case for the removal of the subsidies which had tapped since April, that's 2021. All right, and that's regarding Kenya. We're talking of the fuel prices. Ever since the newly elected president Ruto came into the office, there was a plan to remove the subsidies on fuel, and of course there has been a counteraction regarding his decision. Okay, as we wind up the session, let's head straight to the business tips and quotes, but firstly, let's review the business tip of the day. Today says always over deliver. If you want to ensure that customers buy from you again and again and they tell others about you, over delivering is critical. Does it mean that you have to do something big that causes you to lose money? It can be something small to you, but maybe for the customer, over delivering can be accomplished in different ways. All right, now regarding that, very interesting, delivering this time around, it can be what are you putting out there? Consistency. Consistency is very key, because as you deliver, as you're consistent in what you do, definitely the quality is going to increase. Remember, the focus before you think about making money is to ensure that you please the customer, and of course that comes with the quality, which comes over time due to constant delivery. And now let's wind this up with the business tip, with the business quote of the day. The business quote of the day said, that's by Thomas Jefferson, founding father, president of the United States. I find that the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have. Yeah, definitely. There is the aspect of luck in life. We always speak about luck, but that is never always the case. It comes with luck. Definitely, luck finds you when you're somewhere. For example, you could be achieving, you're trying to draw this goal. You're building a business plan for a multi-billion-dollar company. That's hard work in itself as you're building that plan. But remember, one day, one time, you never know. A venture capital firm might come looking for who to fund, who has already business. But imagine that venture fund found you without a business plan that you've been building for the entire lifetime. You won't get that funding to fulfill that dream. So, as much as we believe in luck, let's be ready. Imagine it came up to you and the venture firm capital came to you to give you that $1 million that you've always needed as capital. But unfortunately, at the time they came, you don't have anything to show. Or probably they are only funding those people that have already started. That's hard work. So luck will always find you at a place of when you have established something, so you cannot replace it with hard work at the same time. And that's it for this particular segment. Let's get into a commercial break. We shall be returning with more. Good morning.